Hello and welcome to the Ecom Sales Tax Podcast. My name is Ryan Johnson. I'm your host, and on today with us is Paul Johnson. Paul, welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for being here with me today. That's all I got to say. When it's not me by myself, it's always a good day. So I've been getting kind of a bunch of different questions. As you know, we've covered marketplace facilitator laws before in the podcast. And as you know, with sales tax and with marketplace facilitator laws, things are just changing. They're changing rapidly. Ever since, July of 2018, when that Wayfair decision was made, laws are constantly changing. And, sometimes it's so that states are trying to make it easier on sellers. They're trying to make it less complicated, or states are trying to capture more tax dollars to increase their revenues. But I wanted to cover some specific questions around marketplace facilitator tax laws, and it goes along with, can I deregister? Because I know that some, maybe a year ago, there were some other third-party sales tax people that would recommend, like, hey, if you're selling FBA or you're using this marketplace facilitator, you should be collecting and you should be registering in 28 states. Now it's 41 states, and a lot of those people, a lot of those people end up registering in all of those states, which can be very pricey. But now I understand there are now states making laws that is not requiring them to be registered. I wonder if you could talk about that. It's like, and people are wondering if they should get deregistered in these states, because these 41 states, have the manufacturer. I keep saying that marketplace facilitator tax laws, and they should just get deregistered in all of them. I mean, I wonder if you could talk about that.
Oh, definitely. It's a great question and a common concern. It gets brought up even amongst our own clients, and we're trying to help our own clients just be compliant, but not incur a bunch of out-of-pocket expenses and costs. Everybody's running on tight margins, trying to maximize profit, minimize costs, sort of thing. So, it's a very common question. Amazon, they're collecting, or they have the ability of collecting in all 47 now with Alaska state, and they're remitting the tax that they're collecting in 41 states, including Alaska, as of April of 2020. So it's a very common question. Can I just deregister if all my sales are through Amazon and they're collecting or remitting the tax on my behalf, then I don't need to be a registered taxpayer and I don't need to file and remit returns, is the common response. But unfortunately, that's not the answer. That's not the right answer. The states, like you're mentioning, have come out and are rapidly changing and updating over time the requirement to be registered. And as of today, there are, I think, 27 total states that have indicated specifically that if all you're doing is selling via a marketplace facilitator and they're collecting and remitting the tax on your behalf, then you don't have a requirement to be registered. You can simply deregister your account. Or if you're not registered, you don't have a requirement to register. But in the remaining 14 states, 27 of the states where Amazon's collecting, they're remitting it on your behalf. The remaining 14 states, they haven't specifically indicated that you can deregister just yet. And so, according to the state, you're on the hook, you have nexus, you're making sales in another state, you have a requirement by law to report those sales and be a registered taxpayer. Now, once you're on the hook, they've got that requirement imposed upon you. Should you be registered? Should you continue to be registered? Well, that's a question to consider from a business perspective, because The next step after nexus that we look at and review with clients is what your tax liability is. And if your tax liability is zero, because you sell through a marketplace facilitator and he's remitting that tax on your behalf, then all your sales now are null. There's no tax liability because it's being collected and remitted on your behalf. Then what are the pros and cons of registering or deregistering in that state? And so it's a very common thing that we help even our current clients help understand the pros and the cons related to that.
Yeah. So basically, one of the main factors you're going to be looking at is if you sell solely on a marketplace facilitator.
Yeah.
You were explaining to me earlier, there's kind of a, there's a difference. You were explaining to me Alabama versus Arizona, how their laws are different.
Yeah.
Could you, each state is going to have their own kind of requirements. I was wondering, because it can get complicated, especially when you're looking, it's like, well, I can deregister in 27 states. I'm going to do that. But there's some things you have to look out for. I was wondering if you could kind of go over that example as what you need to be looking for.
Oh, for sure. In some of the states like Alabama or Colorado, maybe Connecticut, Pennsylvania, although your sales are all made through a marketplace facilitator, the state themselves administer that a little bit different. So in these states, they're specifically indicating that even though you sell through a marketplace facilitator, you still have a requirement to report those sales to the state and either claim a deduction or claim a credit on the return so that the tax doesn't get remitted by both parties. Because obviously Amazon's not going to give you that tax that is being collected on those transactions with the disbursements that they're giving you. They're going to withhold that tax to report it to the applicable state. So in a state like Alabama, you're going to make the sale, you're going to collect the tax, Amazon is, and they're going to remit that tax. But Alabama specifically indicates that as a seller with physical inventory in the state, or as a seller who exceeds the economic nexus threshold, you don't have to be, or you have to be registered. Whereas in Arizona, even though you have physical inventory and you've exceeded the threshold in the state, since all of the sales are being made through a marketplace facilitator, you don't have to be registered. So it's very tricky and very different state by state, as most sales and use tax matters are. It just depends on the state and how they administer it. And they're constantly changing, not state by state. So Arizona's not changing this month and then changing back. No. They're constantly updating. Alabama, not this month, but maybe in 6 months they'll come around and they'll say, oh, you don't have to be registered. So it's constantly evolving, I guess would be a proper, better way to put it, as far as remaining registered or not.
So, that kind of covers people that are registered already and thinking about possibly deregistering, and maybe they didn't even know that this is even an option. And if you would like to talk about this with Paul, possibly even, go ahead and fill out the link down below. Simple form, takes about 3 minutes to fill out, and you can get on the phone with us and we can help you to figure out whether or not you can deregister. But the second half of this podcast, something that I've been running into is people selling on marketplace facilitators, is that they figure, well, why don't I just, if the laws are trending towards, you don't have to get registered, and states are going to require these marketplace facilitators to collect and remit the tax on my behalf, should I just not get registered? I mean, what is that? Is that an option?
Definitely. It's definitely something worth considering as the states continue to move in this direction. One would argue that all the states are going to be there eventually, so I'm not even going to worry about it. But it's important to note that once they make that transition from the seller to the facilitator, the historic liability never goes away unless it falls off under a statute. But the statute of limitations, that's a whole different conversation. Does it start? When does it start? Can the states go back beyond their statute of limitations? Under what circumstances could they? So from a liability perspective, you've always got to be thinking in the back of your mind, what is my tax liability, truly? And the tax liability starts the day you cross the economic nexus or the nexus threshold, whether it be physical, click-through, economic, affiliate nexus. I mean, there's a myriad of ways that the states will impose their tax upon you as a seller. And so once you've established nexus, then that tax liability, that clock starts. And so if you're operating in the state for 6 months and then the marketplace facilitator kicks in, where they're collecting and remitting on your behalf, then for those 6 months, it's still your liability. And under audit, the state's going to impose that tax plus penalty and interest on that tax liability that you should have collected and remitted to the state directly. But the other note I wanted to mention was, what if you're selling on Amazon, but also you're selling on your own website, or maybe you're selling on Amazon and you're selling on eBay or some other platform? It's important to understand what that platform's doing with the tax that's being collected, if it's being collected, how it's being collected. eBay is similar to Amazon in collecting and remitting in 41 states. They seem to be following the same pattern. Walmart's right along with them. Etsy they're collecting it everywhere. But a platform like Shopify, who is just a shopping cart to your website, obviously they're not a marketplace facilitator. You're going to be responsible for the tax collection on those sales in the states where you've established nexus. Again, that's not in everywhere. It's just where you've established nexus. So a very common question is this: Alabama, for example, is if I'm selling in Amazon, or if I'm selling via a marketplace facilitator, have I established nexus? Well, you got to look at the economic nexus legislation, and if you've exceeded it. In a state like Arizona, they specifically indicated if all you do is sell through a marketplace facilitator, they're collecting or remitting on your behalf, you don't have to be registered. Well, what happens if I'm selling also on Shopify or via Shopify on my website? Well, technically, according to legislation, the economic nexus kind of resets, if you will, based on the sales you make through your website only. So in determining, do I have nexus in the state? Well, you got physical nexus due to inventory, yes or no? If no, do you have economic nexus? An economic nexus is determined based on the sales made outside of the marketplace facilitator. So all the sales you make through a facilitator are excluded from the determination of, do I have economic nexus? So you're only including, or you're only determining the sales made through your own website. You don't have to include the other sales through the facilitator. So then you make the decision, well, I only made $10 in sales in Shopify, and most of my business, 90%, 95, 100, 99% of my business is through Amazon. And maybe you just turn off the sales in Shopify, or maybe you stop selling through your website, or you just make the determination, because if it's material enough and you've exceeded nexus, if you've exceeded the economic nexus, you've established that, then you're on the hook. So you got to make a call. Do I leave it out there? Do I roll the dice, kick the can down the road? Do I play audit roulette, as I like to call it? Hope I don't get caught. I don't know. That's a business decision right there that what we could help you make. So, for sure.
Excellent. Sounds complicated.
Very complicated.
But it's definitely something that needs to be looked at. And we kind of have what we call a next review. And, no matter if you haven't registered yet, you're looking to get registered, and you're thinking like, well, what do I do next? How do I determine whether to get registered? A next review is for you. And if you have already registered in all the states and you're thinking, well, maybe I should get deregistered, next review is for you. It's just helping you determine what to do next. And
Yep,
so thanks again, Paul, for being on with
of
me.
course.
And make sure and find the link down below to the form so you can schedule your time to speak with us and help you determine what to do next. All right. Well, I hope to see you on another one, Paul.
Thanks again for having me, Ryan.
Yeah. Talk to you soon.
All righty, bye-bye.